Hey everyone, and welcome to Bright and Early, the podcast for people building early stage startups. I'm your host, Brian Ray. I talk to entrepreneurs, product people, designers, and marketing pros to learn what works, what doesn't, and why, giving you at least one thing to apply to your business first thing tomorrow. My guest today is Morgan Legge. Morgan is a remote work evangelist at convert.com, a personalization and A/B testing tool for enterprises. She'll be speaking at the upcoming Running Remote conference in Austin on April the 20th. Morgan, welcome to Bright and Early.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here.
It's a real pleasure to have you. We were talking just before we started recording. I'm really excited to talk to you because besides being a remote work evangelist and having a lot of things to say there, I also noticed in your Twitter bio that you're a proponent, or Convert operates on the holacracy framework. Operates on the holacracy framework. Is that the right way to say it or describe it? Or
yeah, I would say operates on, powered by. We like to say that it's the jet fuel in our success. It's uniquely paired to remote work, but we can dive into that. But yeah, it's there's lots to learn from that operating system of how to run your business.
Okay. We'll get there in just one second. But so for people who may not be familiar with Convert, like super quick elevator pitch, what does convert.com do? And
so we're an A/B testing and personalization software solution, primarily used by marketing agencies or internal optimization teams that look to grow revenue on their websites. So we're affordable enterprise solution. Our founder likes to call us the IKEA of A/B testing and personalization tools, and it very self-service and easy to use, and loved by a lot of different industries.
Okay, and so now let's talk about the holacracy thing, because I mentioned that you're speaking at an upcoming conference, and I've seen you mentioned in some other places, and oftentimes it will say Morgan Legge, Director of Operations, or Head of Operations. That's not actually your title, because in a holacracy framework, people don't have titles because there is no hierarchy.
Dude, you're calling me out in front of the entire internet?
You do have roles.
I do. I have many roles. Yes, it's correct. It's non-hierarchical.
Okay.
We do a couple of things. So to face the outside world, we can use any title we'd like, as long as it's not a C-suite title. Okay. To show and kind of represent what we do internally.
Yeah. To speak the language so that people know roughly where you
exactly.
Yeah.
If I were to tell you that, I list the roles that I have, the 15 roles that I hold within Convert, you get a lot of confused looking people.
Right.
And the reality is that titles mean a lot to the quote unquote outside world, right? So the amount of, I call myself Director of Operations because I help Convert run smoothly. That's what I do.
Okay. Yes.
In a lot of different roles, but that's what I do.
Okay.
And I've built this team from 5 to 40 people. So I think that it's very apt. Okay.
But Convert operates, or is, a very flat organization. Is that true? Because I'm making that assumption based on the little bit that I know about holacracy, or do you have an adaptation that you run on internally that actually there are some reporting things in place, or how do you make that work?
I think that flat is a misnomer, right? Okay. Like holacracy is not flat. Flat would infer that you have a lot of bodies involved in decision-making processes. And that is not the case with holacracy. And it also implies that there is not a lot of structure. Within holacracy, I think the thing that people don't get is there actually is a ton of structure. And that's what allows so much flexibility. It seems kind of paradoxical, but within a very strict structure, you have all the freedom. So it's a great way to work remotely and asynchronously because it's very, very clear about what people are doing, which person holds which role, and what the limits of their sandbox are. Okay. So, yes, we have processes in place within our company. We use OKRs. We definitely, it's not a free for all. I just actually walked out of a tactical meeting, which is kind of like we have a weekly meeting, and it's we process a lot of and surface a lot of things that help to move the company forward. So I think that there's kind of this misperception that holacracy is structureless, and somehow that we just kind of like figure it out as we go along, and then nothing could be further from the truth.
Okay, and you said that that holacracy and remote work together are a huge factor in Convert.com's success.
Yes.
What are a few specific reasons why you think that's true, and how can others maybe learn from that arrangement?
The clarity that it brings. So I think that to have growth, you have to have a lot of clarity in terms of what not only your objectives, but what each person's role is within that. Okay. So just to give a little bit of context to the listeners, like Convert.com, we're a remote first company. Okay. We are 40 people from very, very diverse backgrounds. Okay. Culturally, economically, everything. Okay. We're 10 time zones, I think. Like, I don't even count that anymore. Okay. And we are an American company, okay, but we're non-American as it gets. So, I'm Canadian. There's another Canadian. There's another American, and she's traveling the world somewhere. I have no idea where. She's our digital nomad. And the reason I bring this up is that our common language is English, okay, and we work very asynchronously. But this operating system allows us to be self-managed and self-organized, and really focus on the purpose of the organization, the purpose of your team, the purpose of your role, and it's very clear delineations of where your quote-unquote power starts and stops. Okay? So it doesn't mean that you can't have opinions about something else. It doesn't mean that you can't impact. You have to do it with permission. It has to be very intentional. So this helps our growth because you can imagine with those kinds of time zones, if it's 2 a.m, you need to be super clear on what are the limits of what you can do, or like what you can do. Like what's your sandbox? What's in there that you can really be instrumental in moving forward. And yeah.
And would you say, so within as a team member, if I'm within those limits and I know what those limits are, do I then have complete autonomy to work within those limits and change a decision that was made? Because now I'm on a different time zone. I don't want to wait, a day to get back in sync. If I work within those limits, do I have autonomy to change?
Yes.
And make, okay.
Yeah. And to start, like, no one should be impacting those to begin with. So to use the word change something, that person who impacted your domain actually right off the bat doesn't have the right to do that without permission. There's a lot of, listen, there's a whole constitution. Okay. It's dry. It's being revamped to be an easier read. It has a lot of rules and, obligations. Like, for example, one of the things that you have to do as a member of this holacracy operating system is you must process any incoming request. So that doesn't mean do it.
Okay.
Right? It means process it,
Okay.
acknowledge it. Say, yes, I'm willing to take that on. No, this is not my accountability. I'm going to put this on my someday maybe or my incubate list. We use GTD to help with productivity. So it's really become super clear that you'll see we use Asana as our project management tool that, you're constantly getting tasks that are due today, but these are really just to see them.
Like to pass them through the processing?
To pass them through the processing. So in one of my roles as remote work evangelist, which is a role I hold, I'll have like 5 tasks and someone will just write something like, oh, I saw this tool, or I saw this article really interesting. It's just literally to get it on my radar, and then I can file it where I want. Someone needs feedback on something, any number of things, and it's just so your incoming information is processed, and it's very, very clear about that. So I think that it's a great tool for remote teams, especially if they're asynchronous and they're distributed in wide time zones.
Yeah. So two questions on that. Is the processing framework, like the decision tree or whatever, is that standardized across the company? And then the second question is, what is the response time expectation on that?
So the decision tree, we use the same project management tool across the company. Okay, we have some integrations, but the process is the same.
I mean though, like somebody makes a request. You said that you are obligated to process it. You're not obligated to do it. And so my autonomy of being able to say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, no, or yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, is that standard? Those questions and like, okay.
Yes, that's standard. And, we have an OKR for each quarter, right? So basically working toward, you should be using the purpose of your role to work towards that OKR, right? Okay. So if it doesn't fall within that, then it's a tier 2 or a tier 3 level of priority. It becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly, right? What was the second part of your question?
Second question was expectation of response time.
Oh, right. So when you're online, so we do those for when you're online. You're not required. There's no 24/7 availability or anything like that.
Okay.
We encourage everyone to manage their tech and not have their tech manage them. So, for example, Slack, like I don't have notifications set up. I check Slack. Okay. Slack does not check me.
Okay.
Anytime that I'm online, I need to check Slack once an hour.
Okay.
Unless I'm doing a session of deep work, in which case I will put in an all availability channel. Hey, I'm going into podcast or interview, or I'm going to do some writing or whatever it is. I'll see you in 3 hours.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
And then Asana is once every 3 hours.
Okay. So we've got Slack, we've got chat, project management. Where does email and like a company wiki as those other 2 tools that are common, like do those fit into your communication toolkit, so to speak?
Email, very rarely. So most of the email I get is from outside sources.
Okay.
I don't even think I can count on one hand the amount of emails I get internally in a week.
Okay.
And there are, I'd say, about a third of us who operate zero inbox. So we use that same kind of processing mechanisms. And we're working on actually this kind of like Convert.com 2.0 internally is going to have a wiki. We don't have one now. We use Google Drive, which is, we're kind of reaching the limits as to what's
navigable.
I don't think I need to talk anymore about that. I think that everyone
totally.
can feel my pain.
Totally.
Yeah.
So more in-depth, I'm making an assumption here, but the more in-depth conversations happen in Asana in context of a project or a task. Is that
correct?
Fair? Okay, as opposed to like emails and...
Yes. So, I mean, I can deep dive into Asana, but it's really, so each role that you hold is a project.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So you have a project in Asana that is remote work evangelist?
Yes.
Okay.
And then that, we're going to go down a rabbit hole here.
That's totally fine with me.
Okay. Yeah, you're all about the rabbit holes, right? So I have a project in Asana called Remote Work Evangelist, which is then organized next actions, future actions, someday maybes, incubate, GTD style.
Yes.
There's also a section that is a placeholder. It's called placeholder. And this is cross-populated into a project called Convert Team.
Okay.
So when we do our weekly meetings, you can filter Convert Team by circle, member, any number of ways.
Right.
Okay. And you do your weekly updates in your placeholder for your role project. So if people are still with me at this point, in Remote Work Evangelist, in the placeholder, which has the same name as the title of my role, I write my weekly update, which is not a detailed, I have to validate my time update. It's a high level overview as to what I think are the most important key points that helped drive my role forward or drive the OKR forward. If people have questions, they can ask them, but I don't need to justify my hours a week in my update, right? Yeah. So then again, within Remote Work Evangelist role, I have another section that's projects. So those projects have a defined start and end. The role does not.
Okay. Right.
So a project would have, your most desired outcome, what the impact is on the OKR.
Okay.
And then I would also give a weekly update on that.
Okay.
And those we use, we took a page out of Springest, company in the Netherlands that has been operating on Holacracy for, I think I want to say 6 or 7 years.
Okay.
And they use this status bar update that they kind of like hacked Asana to use GTD and Holacracy.
Okay.
And we copied their methods because we thought they were really smart and really useful, And I think that that's the thing, like when you're looking at not just Holacracy, but also remote work, it's totally cool to take little pieces and parts from people who've come before. For sure.
And so this is what I think is so interesting, and why I was excited to talk to you, is that it sure sounds like communication and the structure of communication at Convert, it does not happen by accident. Like there is a pretty good structure of when something should be communicated, where it should be communicated, how it ought to be communicated. And the more people I talk to, it feels like when issues come up for team members, especially, it's because like, well, I'm getting this request in Slack. How fast should I respond to it? Should this be a question in Slack, or do I respond in the project management thing or whatever? It sounds like there's a very deliberate process within Convert.
This is 100% okay. True.
And so what were some of the challenges, or were there, challenges along the way to get to this point where it sounds like the expectations are clear. I'm certain it's not without its flaws and imperfections because it's a human-made organization. But what was the process like in getting it to this point, and what advice do you have for teams who are floundering in the sea of tools available right now?
So I'll answer the second part first. Be intentional and pick a few tools. I subscribe to a whole bunch of newsletters about the newest and hottest and greatest thing about remote work tools. And it's like, I just don't have enough hours in the day to be on top of all that.
Who does? Yeah.
So we use what we use. When we come across things that could be of interest, we'll share them with the relevant role. If there's not a problem, then you don't need to go down the rabbit hole of trying to fix something that isn't broken.
Right.
Really be intentional and clear. I think that we need to, as leaders, really remember that transparency is king, and we have to be intentional and kind about the way we communicate with people, but we need to stop caring a lot as much as we do about perceptions and how people take things, right? So don't be rude, but be direct.
Right.
And that's the thing that we've in our multicultural team, it's super important because, if you speak in idiomatic English or you use indirect ways to try and communicate what you're feeling, that often gets lost cross-culturally and cross languages, right? So being direct and empathetic at the same time is a really, really good way to kind of settle that chaos, right? I think that, as we've developed in this process of adopting holacracy, it's changed the way that we look at, for example, hiring, because you were talking about, communication and all these ways that we're working on our team. And we realized that it wasn't enough to just look for talent. We actually had to make sure that people who were getting into the pipeline to begin with were showing great communication skills.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you could be great at your job, but if you're not comfortable communicating, it's not going to work.
Right. Yeah, hearing this a lot. Okay, that's really good. So, I mean, communication repeatedly comes up as a top tier struggle for remote teams. Another one that comes up quite often are feelings of isolation and loneliness among team members. Is that something that Convert has addressed or has needed to address or thinks about on a regular basis?
I mean, I definitely think about it. I spent, a long time putting my home office together. So it's a very comfortable, safe, optimized space for me. I like working in it. But I realized that working too much from home impacted my ability to interact with the outside world.
Right.
I'm an introvert by nature. And as much as I love people, I really need downtime. But the thing I realized is that the more that I spent away from, quote unquote, the real world, the harder it was to interact with it. So, what I do is I force myself to go and work either in a co-working space or in a public place, cafe, restaurant, whatever, library. And I do that a couple of times a week.
Okay.
And that I found is helpful. So the other thing that we do is we have a lot of, I think we have 10 or 12 public channels, which are open to our freelancers and Convert Essentials. So anyone who works with Convert has access to those. And we're pretty open about how we feel, right? And I think that if you're building and scaling a company, you have to be the change that you want to see. You have to be intentional, and you have to lead by example. You can't just write in a handbook, oh, be honest about, if you're feeling lonely or depressed or that you're having a hard day or stressed out when other people aren't doing it, right? It puts you in a very vulnerable position.
Right.
And I think, I know that we do a good job of that. You'll see in those threads, oh, I'm feeling really stressed out after this call I had. I'm going to take some time out and leave. I am going to see my therapist. Like, people will talk about this.
Normalize that. Yep.
Yeah, it's super, super important. Like we want people to bring their whole selves to work. The same person that you are in front of the camera should be the same person that you are when you're with your friends. Maybe the cleaned up version, like,
but at least authentic to what your actual state of mind is and truly how you're doing. Hey listeners, we'll get back to the interview in just a second, but this is a great time to pause and let you know that Bright and Early is brought to you by Transistor.fm. Transistor offers you professional podcast hosting and analytics. They host this very podcast, and listen, y'all, it could not be any easier. Product is ridiculously easy to use. If you've got a question, Justin and John, the guys behind the software, are super responsive. I've needed to reach out a time or two for some help. They were all over it. So if you're thinking about starting a podcast for your business, just pop on over to Transistor.fm and let them know that Brian sent you. Are there things that Convert does that offers as, not necessarily perks or benefits, but like a co-working stipend or a home office, comfort stipend, or things like that you all offer to your remote employees to make sure that they're working from a place that is productive and comfortable?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super proud of the things that we put together, actually. And it's these perks are extended. They start with people. So we have different tiers, different types of converters. So there's core members, which don't have to be full-time. No, but core members, so that's anyone with a convert.com email address.
Okay.
They're people who have like full insight into the company's inner workings. Okay. Then we have essentials, who are people who help us do the great things that we do. Okay. And they could even, work 30 hours a week, but sometimes they've decided that they don't want to have the extra obligations of being a core team member, meetings, budgets, things like this. And then we have freelancers. Okay. So the essentials and core members both have access to Kindle, Audible credits. They have a productivity budget, which is so a Convert Essential could work, 5 or 6 hours a week, but they'll get a minimum of $50 a month to help with any kind of productivity. A core part-time member or full-time member, it starts at $150 and then goes up to $250 a month. And you could spend that any way you want. Yes. You don't have to provide a receipt. Like, we're not into micromanagement at Convert. So you just put on your, I need to be reimbursed for $73.83. Fantastic.
All right. So I could use that toward a co-working space, or I could use it toward more lighting in my home office.
Yeah, or upgrading your bandwidth.
Okay.
Or we've had people actually use it for lunch at a beach club because it was the best place where they were traveling that had Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And they're like, I need to pay and sit here. This is productivity. Like,
truly,
this is very important.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine. And then, when you get it, so I have, I have put together most of this office based on
off of that budget. Okay. That's fascinating. Anything else around there that internal tools that you've developed or that y'all have used? Not around like, the traditional, Asana, Zoom, Slack that we've heard of. Are there other tools that you've found to be super useful in like the psychological aspect of working remotely that you've found to be helpful?
So I think that I want to touch on, maybe it's not so much a tool, but it's really, it's a perk in terms of health. I know that one of your previous guests had talked about the difficulty in healthcare and helping people, like the whole
Shanik
person.
from
Shanik, Yep. And so I think that this speaks to that. So he pointed out very honestly that healthcare for remote employees is incredibly difficult, and we had that same realization. We wanted to offer mental health options to our employees, to our members, and it just wasn't possible. Like, you find a therapist in Indiana or California, and they only have the license to practice in certain states, and they won't do sessions with people who are located elsewhere, or you forget international, right?
Right.
Same with Europe. Super, super difficult. So what we decided was the best thing, and kind of hit us like with a ton of bricks, is that we put the power back into the hands of the members of the team. So we give $500 a month. It's on a company card, so everyone gets a physical card. I happen to be in a city that, for some strange reason, certain people only accept personal checks. So I still have to write a personal check, but then I just, I use it out of my $500 budget, and then I just request the reimbursement, right? So anyway, it's $6,000 a year, basically. Spend on anything that makes you a happier, more productive, more whole professional and converter. So it could be anything. Could really, and you're free to do that. And I think that it gives, it could be family health care, it could be health insurance for your family. It could be a meal, like a meal plan, or a caregiver for elderly family member. It could be house cleaning. I pay for my snow clearing. My driveway, because I don't want to hurt myself. But these things, I think, give freedom to the person to decide what's best for them in their particular environment, with the obligations that they have with their families and their communities, right? And I don't think that it's easy to have a one-size-fits-all solution.
Exactly.
So I think that the solution is, and I kind of take issue with the way Shanik said, like, I don't want to throw money at it. But I think you do. Like, who am I to tell somebody that you have $200 or $300 or $500 a month, but you have to spend it on this particular thing?
Interesting. Right.
No, I don't know. I can't know. And we have so much autonomy and trust within our team. It's like contrary to what we do, right? Like, I have a budget for my remote work evangelist role. Okay. It's that I can spend however I want to move my role forward. I don't need to ask someone for permission. So why should I have to check boxes for?
Yeah,
that.
like here's a resource. Here's a defined set of resources. Operate intelligently with your local information and get the most out of it in the way that you can without asking for permission and check in and sign off.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, that stands
Like
to reason.
you're the best steward of your life, right?
Yeah, stands to reason. The thanks for that. I mean, Convert clearly cares about you're working with people.
Yes.
And taking care of people and putting them at the center of the business ends up working out well for the business. Ties in super tightly with the third thing I want to ask you about. That is another extremely common top tier challenge for remote teams and remote workers, and that is establishing and maintaining healthy work-life boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had a couple of like very pithy pull quotes early on, like, you don't, Slack does not check you, you check Slack, or whatever. I'll go
it's
back
not
and
the
get
boss
it right.
of me.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like, what are your personal practices around establishing healthy boundaries between when you're at home, when are you working, when are you at home, when are you not? Like, what are vacations like, and how are people, expected to stay in touch? Like, how do you guys work that out?
So your listeners can't see, but I'm super smiling because one of the perks that we have that I really love that's really representative of how we feel about your relationship with your work is we have a perk called Off the Grid Bonus.
Okay.
And it's basically, you're going to take a break if you take 7 consecutive days. Okay, so it's not eligible for 4 days consecutively. You have to be taking 7 consecutive days.
Okay.
And you don't talk to us. No Slack, no email, no intercom, no Asana. Like, we don't want to see you.
Okay.
At all. You get $250.
If you do the 7-day off the grid, you get
yes.
Okay. Why does it have to be 7 days and not 5, like a work week?
Because we think that 7 is it requires a little more.
Yeah.
Like it 4 and 5 is kind of like people can get through. They can kind of grit their teeth and get to 5, but 7 is like, oh my God, I'm going back to work the next day. I need to know what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So 7 is the run that we use.
Okay.
And and I think that speaks a lot to how we see the relationship between Convert and the team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I am the boss of my tech. It's not the boss of me. Okay.
Right.
That's what I was talking about. So, for example, yes, I do have Slack on my phone. I do have all these tools on my phone, but I have my notifications there's no notifications.
Okay.
So I don't get pinged for anything. I have to physically check it to know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm like, no, you know what? I really actually do need I just want to be fully cleansed of this. And I did this over the holiday break. It took 2 solid weeks. I just deleted everything. I didn't want to be tempted. I was like, you know what? Place isn't going to burn down. Like, none of us are. There's maybe 2 people on the team that are that important. Okay. In terms of, keeping the application running for our customers.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
They don't have that luxury, but that's what they've signed up for accepting a certain role, right? None of my roles have that kind of expectation or anything like that. So I think that the best thing that someone could do as a leader, you need to lead by example in terms of that. So you'll see that you will get chided publicly on Slack if, oh, I have such a bad headache, I'm going to get offline, I'm, starting a migraine or something. And then you see someone pop up like an hour later. It's like, why are you here?
Yeah. Go get some
Go
rest.
away. Like, you'll see, our founder will say, oh, my in-laws are in town. Like, I'm doing reduced hours, or I'm not going to be online for the next 2 days, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And he just doesn't show up.
Yeah. So modeling that.
Absolutely.
And following through. Yeah.
So I think that, if people are supportive, I'm not feeling well, I have to, something comes up, I had to reschedule our podcast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something came up. I had to tell my team, hey, listen, XYZ, I'll see you tomorrow. And that was it. Like, it's really about being a results-oriented work environment. So as long as you're doing what you said you were going to do, and following up and following through, that's really all we care about.
Letting that be your visibility in the quote workplace, as opposed to like responding on every request within 20 minutes so that so-and-so knows that I'm working.
Right. That just tells me that you can't manage your time, that you don't have a delineation between your work and your personal life. Yeah. Like, that to me doesn't make you a hero. And I think it's interesting because we ask different kinds of questions like this in the hiring process to weed out people like that. And we're not looking for those types of workers. One of the things that we do in onboarding too is we actually have tasks for people to go and read the historical threads of our Slack channels. It's literally a task. And I was talking to somebody, we're doing a buddy call, and she was like, yeah, I was just kind of skimming through it, and then it kind of hit me, like, this is actually work. Like, I'm supposed to go through the all events and learning channel. I'm supposed to go through the water cooler channel. I'm supposed to go through the humble brag channel and like read through everything and be conscious and be intentional about it. Like, yes. Right. And it could take 8 hours.
Yeah.
Like,
and that is part of your job.
That is part of your job as onboarding. We want you. So I think it's like when people go through that process of onboarding, they see the interactions between people. They see the energy of what an emoticon or what a GIF can do, or what sharing certain information can do, or how people be empathetic to each other in a digital platform. They realize that it's not a virtual place for us. It is a place. This is where we get to know and meet each other. Yeah. And, we have buddy calls and things like that too. But, so I think that when you get on the team and you start to go through that onboarding process, you see the sense of humor, you see those kinds of things, you understand very clearly that there is this separation between work and personal. And it's very obvious that it's something that we do practice. It's not just something we preach, we practice it too. So I think that it's one thing to do it, but then you also have to kind of force people who are being onboarded in the team to realize that, hey, this is just not a talking point. This is something that we actually subscribe to.
Yes, definitely. Morgan, how can listeners find and follow you online?
That's it.
We're there.
Oh, right. Fair enough. I would love to continue a conversation about remote work or any of the topics we've talked about today. I can be found on LinkedIn. I can also be found on Twitter. That's Morgan Legge, YUL, and it's Morgan Legge on LinkedIn.
My guest today has been Morgan Legge. Morgan, thank you so much. This was a real delight.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Okay, let's do some closing thoughts here. Are you like me, and were you checking Convert.com's job openings page 2/3 of the way through the interview? No, in all seriousness, I am a very big fan of Morgan specifically, Convert.com generally. It's clear that they take, people operations and the way that they care for their team members, that they are very thoughtful about those things and take it very seriously. It's interesting, to be a holacracy company, a holacratic. Is that a word? A holacratic company, a company that functions on the holacracy operating system. That requires, ironically, more organization in order to enable more autonomy and more freedom, and which is, basically what remote work requires the same. More organization, more documentation, so that you have more freedom and more flexibility. And so it's pretty interesting how intertwined those two disciplines, those two practices are. And yeah, it became clear, as Morgan was kind of fleshing out their practices, talking about the way that they operate, that there's a lot of compatibility between the sorts of things that you need to do in order to be an effective remote team and an effective team that is holacratic. I'm just going to say it again. So no surprise there. It does strike me, like, stick with me on this for a second, because the first thing that I'm getting ready to say may strike you as out of sync with some of the other things I've said, but stick with me. I was a guest on a podcast that has not yet been released. I'll let you know when it comes out, but it was about loneliness and remote work specifically. And so the host was asking me, we were talking through all these issues, and I was explaining, like, here's what I've observed, here's what I think is important, this is what companies can do, et cetera, et cetera. And our question was, what responsibilities does the company bear for addressing these issues around collaboration, loneliness, isolation, et cetera. And my thought on that is, what, when it comes all the way down to it, what the company is responsible for, not whether or not they should, or can, or, whatever, what they are responsible for is a fair wage in exchange for work provided, for services provided. Okay. So, like, that's what they're responsible for. All these practices that we're talking about, best practices, these are things that lend a competitive advantage. And so it's not that you, to be a remote first company, or even a quote remote friendly company, you can offer remote, friendly positions, that you need to be thinking through, communication, communication documentation, all these, like, wellness benefits, retreats, summits, like, thinking through all of those things. You don't have to do any of them. When you do, you will have a competitive advantage over companies who are not taking these things seriously and are only offering, hey, you can work remotely for us and you can do it anywhere in the world. Okay, that's nice for a little bit. It is very likely to lead to turnover, burnout, and all sorts of other things that in the long run, not even the long run, in the short to midterm, are going to be expensive for you as a company. Nothing is more important than your personnel. And by doing these things that Morgan is talking about, that Convert is doing, you can bet that their employee retention numbers are above average, which, it's a happy fact that it results in an ROI for the company. To be in a position to have budget to be able to trust employees with a $150 to $250 productivity budget, to be able to offer a no questions asked $500 wellness budget, and a $250 off the grid 7-day bonus, to be able to be in a position to offer those things is the right thing to do for people. If you're when you are able to do it, it's just a happy fact that it also ends up benefiting the bottom line of the business. People are more productive when they're rested. They stick around longer when they feel cared for. They are more creative when they're encouraged to rest. It's just one of these interesting things where we know what we ought to do, but sometimes we struggle to do it in exchange for what we think we need to do in the here and now. So just really appreciate. I love talking about the people interactions and just like the people side of businesses. The metrics and analytics, like all that stuff is so important. You can definitely like dial in and find like bits and pieces of your funnel overall that could be tweaked and have a material impact on the business. Completely true. Totally down with it. Like, sign me up. It's just also fascinating that we are people. Like, every business is made up of people who have emotions and, other priorities that are factoring into their lives. And we can't just put people in and as cogs in a wheel and expect good things to come out. Most especially, I'm going to say like either all of us or the overwhelming vast majority of us are operating, knowledge-based or like knowledge skills businesses where all of that stuff just factors in so heavily. What else? My question around some communication things. Morgan's answer around how to structure those things was like, be intentional. Great advice specifically for communication expectations and agreements, but it's also like, it is just the consistent and persistent thing across all like best practices for remote teams is you got to be intentional. It's not necessarily fun to set this time aside to create a communications manual and refer to it on a regular basis. Is not necessarily fun, but if you just let communications patterns and culture around that emerge, then you're setting yourself up for struggles that will be more difficult to reshape in the future. And obviously, depending upon the size of your company, obviously, depending upon the rate of employee growth at your company, no doubt. But I would be willing to bet if a leader were to take the approach when you're a 3-employee company of we're not doing that stuff right now and it's working out fine, we all get along, and so we'll stick with that. I'd place a pretty good bet that by the time you get to 7 and 8, and then especially up to 15 and 30, if you go that if you grow at that sort of rate, you'll be setting yourselves up for some struggles that would be much easier to establish better patterns right now for the good of everybody, create a bit more structure now so that you can enable more flexibility and freedom for yourself. So yeah, I guess that's all I would say is like, if you're hearing this and thinking, we're fine, like take a little bit of a step back, consider what you might be setting yourself up for in the future, and how having those things in place could potentially act as a recruiting tool, to be able to tell people, hey, listen, we yes, you can work for us remotely, you can work anywhere, that's nice, but here are the really important things about remote work that you need to know, and you need to know that we're thinking about them on all of our behalves. Okay, that'll do it. As always, please let me know what you think. I am B-Ray on Twitter. That is BRHEA. You can find show notes at brightandearlypodcast.com, and I will talk to you next week.